There are certain crimes that have baffled investigators for decades, and even with all the evidence they have, they still can't figure out who could have done such a thing or why. Some of these crimes are so horrific that they become infamous worldwide, and today we'll be taking a look at one such case. It's me, you're watching this channel, and today I'm going to tell you about the Cleveland torso murders, which took place in Cleveland, Ohio during the 1930s. The killer was never caught by police, and the case remains open to this day. It's not entirely clear how many people were murdered by the killer, but it's thought to be anywhere between 12 and 50 people. The reason there is such a wide range is because only 13 victims could be linked to the same killer with forensic certainty. The rest were either killed by different killers or simply disappeared. But it's highly likely that they were also victims of the East Side Killer. That's what the press dubbed him anyway. So why was he called the East Side Killer? Well, this was the name given to an unidentified serial killer active in Cleveland, Ohio in the 1930s, who was known to kill victims on the east side of Cleveland. The first victim wasn't discovered until May 1935, but it's believed that the killer had been active since 1930. On May 1935, residents near the 1300 block of East 93rd Street in Cleveland, Ohio, were horrified when they discovered the body of a man in the early hours of the morning. They quickly notified the police, and soon word spread throughout the city about the gruesome crime that had been committed. What made this murder so horrifying was the way in which the victim had been killed. Not only had he been stabbed several times, but his arms and legs had also been cut off and his torso mutilated. For the police, this was already a grisly murder scene, but it would soon get far worse. Over the next 3 years, Cleveland would be terrorized by a serial killer who would target victims across the east side of the city, mutilate their bodies, and leave them in various locations. To make matters even more sinister, the killer seemed to be enjoying the fear he was spreading amongst the community, as he would often taunt the police with letters that he sent them. In these letters, he would gloat about his crimes and even brag about how he would continue to strike again and again. Between 1935 and 1938, 9 men and 4 women were found dead in Cleveland, having been killed in the same manner. The body of one woman was never recovered, and several other people also went missing. During this time frame, although their bodies were never found and their cases were never linked to the East Side Killer, the victims who were eventually recovered had all been killed in the same way. The killer would invite them back to his home under false pretenses, where he would then bind, torture, dismember, and sometimes even cannibalize his victims. After he had finished with their bodies, he would then dump them on the nearby railway tracks or in wooded areas. One of the most disturbing aspects of the case is the fact that the killer seemed to have a particular fascination with dismembering his victims. He would often take great care to cut off their limbs and torso, making sure that the job was done as cleanly as possible. This was not the work of someone who was simply trying to dispose of a body. This was someone who was taking great pleasure in the act of dismemberment itself. It's also interesting to note that the killer seemed to target a wide variety of victims. He didn't seem to discriminate based on age, race, or gender. His victims included a 14-year-old boy, an elderly woman of 63, and everything in between. This suggests that the killer was not motivated by anything other than a lust for killing and dismembering. Despite the brutality of these crimes, the police were unable to catch the killer. He would often evade them by staying one step ahead. He would send them taunting letters telling them where to find some of his victims, but the bodies would already be in bad shape by the time the police arrived. The killer would also sometimes leave behind small clues at the scene of the crime, such as pieces of fabric or tools that he had used to bind his victims. But despite having these clues, the police were unable to track down the killer. In fact, it would take decades for anyone to be charged in connection with the murders. Although the killer was never caught, there were a few suspects. One of the main suspects was a man named Richard Gaddis. He was a former carnival worker who had been convicted of raping a woman in 1936. He had also been seen with several of the victims prior to their disappearances and was known to have had a violent criminal history. Unfortunately for the police, however, he was able to provide alibis for all of the murders and was never charged. Another suspect was a man named John Henry. He was convicted of raping a woman in 1936 and was also seen with one of the victims prior to her disappearance. However, like Gaddis, he was never formally charged in connection with the murders. In the end, the case went cold and the killer was never caught. It's believed that he may have been killed in World War II, but this is just speculation. The case remains open and the murders continue to baffle investigators to this day. Now, here's where things get a little weird. There are some people who believe that the East Side Killer was actually a serial killing duo, not a single person. Their reasoning for this is because of the strength it would have taken to commit these crimes alone, carrying around heavy body parts, disposing of them in different locations, and leaving taunting letters for the police. Seems like it would have been easier to do with more than one person. But this is pure speculation, and there is no concrete evidence to support it. Even though this case remains unsolved, there are still plenty of theories as to who the killer could have been and what his motive was. Some believe that the killer was a doctor who used his victims for medical experiments. Others believe that he was a member of a secret society who used the killings as a form of ritual sacrifice. Still, others believe that the killer was simply a deranged individual who found pleasure in the act of killing and dismembering. But here's the thing, there's no solid evidence to support any of these theories, and it's possible that we may never know what the motive was. As for the victims, they remain unidentified to this day. Many of them were poor or had criminal records, which made it easy for their bodies to go unrecognized for weeks or even months. As a result, we don't know the full extent of the body count. It's possible that the East Side Killer claimed many more victims than we will ever know. The Cleveland torso murders are a horrific and gruesome crime spree that continues to baffle investigators to this day. The brutality of the killings is shocking, and the killer's taunting letters to the police are chilling. Who could have done such a thing and why? We may never know, but one thing is for sure. The Cleveland torso murders remain one of the most infamous and terrifying crime sprees in history. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button below and share it with your friends. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and join our growing family. Who knows, you might just learn something new every day. Until then, I'll see you next time.